I'm here to talk about today is cultural barriers of first-generation college students. And I'll start by going ahead and giving you guys sort of background to who I am. And my name is Tepora, and I am Pacific Islander, specifically Samoan. So when people think of Samoa, they generally don't know where that is. And it's an island in the Pacific Ocean, halfway between like Hawaii and New Zealand. My dad, when you're talking in reference of Samoa, there's kind of two regions. So my dad is from Western Samoa, which is like kind of an independent country. And then my mom is from American Samoa, which is a US territory. And I think that giving you guys this information is kind of important because my parents were raised very differently than how we are on the mainland. And, you know, whenever me and my siblings pop an attitude or anything like that, he loves to bring up that he didn't grow up with shoes and he didn't grow up with the same educational opportunities that we get to have today. And I think knowing that perspective that I'm coming from kind of overlaps with all of these challenges that first generation students sort of not adhere to, but are subjected to. Because I am the first person in my immediate family to earn a college degree, and I'm the first person in my extended family to earn a doctorate degree. And that is, you know, a huge point of pride for my family, because I don't know if you guys got to watch that documentary on Montai Te'o on Netflix, but he's Samoan and he makes this comment throughout the documentary that a big part of our culture is family, faith, and football. And that's absolutely true for me as well. My mom has like 12 brothers and sisters. Each of them have 8 kids, and each of them are working on, you know, their families. So they have 4 to 5 kids. So I have a huge extended family. And to be the first one to get a doctorate degree, like I said before, it's just a huge point of pride for my family. And I think this sort of aligns with, again, some of these challenges that first generation students kind of experience. Right now, I'm the Assistant Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in the Chemical Sciences. So I mostly operate between chemistry and chemical and biomolecular engineering. And my role focuses on the recruitment and retention of students from underrepresented groups, specifically through implementing and sort of designing initiatives that align with DEI best practices. And that's why before when I said that I'm really appreciative of the work that Allies in STEM is doing, I really meant it, because some of these types of programs are exactly what my office is trying to do. And I think that having a sustainable, or making these types of programs a sustainable aspect of our department is a step forward in the right direction. Okay, so I'll start by defining, well, not me defining it, but how Illinois defines first generation college students. And I just did this by a quick search on our website. And the formal definition of a first generation college student is a student whose parents did not complete a 4-year college degree or a university degree. And I think it's super important to have a formal definition so that when you're comparing statistics across your analysis, you're keeping consistent with those data points. In addition to that, I think it's important to identify and define formally what a first generation college student is, so that you can start thinking about the support and the experiences that they face to help them through their college careers. And I think that the University of Illinois really prides itself on its undergraduate first generation demographic. So right now we're about 22.1% first generation college students. And I think that puts us in like the top 50 or the top 100 schools for first generation demographics in the country. So that's a really huge pride point for the University of Illinois, which is awesome. Some other definitions for first generation. First of all, only 73% of institutions in the United States have a formal definition of first generation. Other definitions that you might see include that neither parent or earned a 4-year college degree from an institution in the US. So if your parent earned college degrees from another country but didn't have one in the US, then you're considered first generation. At other institutions, if your parents accomplished an associate degree, then you're not considered first generation. And I think, again, just having a formal definition and being able to approach these different identities in respect to that is a really important aspect of reducing some of these barriers that they face. And here are just some more stats about first generation students. And this is according to NASPA, which is just a national organization that addresses some of the challenges that first generation students face. They also provide, resources and programming for first generation college students and allies of first generation college students. And according to NASPA, this data was taken from 2017 to 2018. 39% of the students earning under or entering undergraduate programs are first generation college students. Right out the, off the jump, first generation students are part of the minority. And I'll get into this a little bit later on how that affects their academic experience. But some of the other stats that I want to point out here, not this one, we're just going to skip it just because I put this here because this is the percentage of graduate students that identify as first generation, but I don't think this number means a lot without knowing the head count of how many graduates graduated that year. I really put that there because this data in this table is based on the students who graduated that year. And what this table tells us is that of the students who identified as American Indian, Alaskan Native, Native Hawaiian, or Pacific Islander, 54% of those students also identified as first generation. And the numbers are even greater for our Hispanic and Latinx community. So of the students who identified as Hispanic or Latinx, 60% of those students are first generation. And the point that I want to make here is that most of our first generation students are majority, please ignore that. Most of our first generation students are majority from underrepresented groups. And also this perspective adds to some of the barriers they face throughout their college experience. And an even more staggering statistic is that of the people who graduated that year, only 11% of our first generation graduate students, or students who have graduated. Sorry, my phone is like connected to my laptop. So before I get any text messages that criminalize me, let me just turn off my data. All right. Only 11% of the undergraduates who are able to complete their degree at a four-year institution go on to apply to graduate school. And in the same study that they did, they took a poll of what students thought they would actually get into graduate school, and only 20% of the 11% that applied actually thought they would get in. And this number only reflects the number of students that applied, and you can imagine that that number is much lower than the ones that were actually admitted. And I think the question to ask ourselves is, why are our recruitment numbers and our pursuit of doctoral degrees so low for first generation students? And the first step in understanding how to approach that question is understanding. I think now the pointer isn't working. Or maybe I have to click the screen again. Is understanding the intersectionality of our first generation students' identities. So you can be first generation and also from an underrepresented group. You can be first generation and also from a family of low income, first generation and also a woman, and then first generation and also from the LGBTQ community. And these are not the only other identities that first generation students can associate themselves with. These are just some of the identities that I frequently see in my line of work. And with these complex identities come a very complex set of both challenges and concerns. So approaching this question by understanding this intersectionality of first gen students and that their identities, impact the experiences that they have. Some challenges that they might face are psychological challenges. So a lot of first gen students feel guilt when they leave their family and potentially their financial responsibilities back at home. I know from personal experience. So on that first slide, if you saw, I have 6 other siblings, 5 of which that are older than me, 5 of which that chose to take a job after high school, then, pursue a college degree. And that alone opened up opportunities for myself to, go to college. And I felt tremendous guilt because of that. And so that's some of the challenges that we face as first generation college students that also are from, low income families and from an underrepresented group. In addition to that, they might feel shame because, they have this feeling that they're an imposter on campus, that they're part of the minority, and because they aren't as apt to navigating this academic landscape in comparison to their continuing generation peers, they might be, ashamed of that. Sometimes they might feel confusion. So, similarly with not being able to, or not having that support system at home that has experienced going to college, And that support system being able to give you advice on how to approach some of the issues or challenges you might face when you're out getting your undergraduate degree. They might be confused about how to navigate that process. And this might cause anxiety. In addition, some other, places that might cause anxiety are financial concerns. So thinking about all of these student loans that you're going to have to pay off, or, sometimes you might have to take on 1 or 2 jobs to supplement the loans that you're getting to put food on the table and things like that. And these psychological challenges negatively impact, their academic experience. In addition to that, they might feel academic challenges. So this feeling of arriving ill-prepared. A lot of our students, first-generation students who also identify with being from an underrepresented group and from family incomes, they might not have gone to rigorous secondary schools as their, continuing generation peers. And the idea that you're coming in less prepared than your peers might cause you to feel less confident in the classroom and might impact them negatively academically. In addition to that, they might have difficulty navigating the academic system. So again, not having that support from home that has gone through the experience of being in college or dealing with financial aid and how to navigate that. It puts constraints on, your time, your mental health, etc. And one big thing here is students that don't have mentors in the framework that they need them at home have to find them on campus. And advocating for themselves, thinking that they deserve a mentor, or even just finding someone who looks like them, who they think would be an applicable mentor for them. That's a challenge that some of us first-generation students have to face. Financial concerns, as I mentioned before, when you come from a family of lower income and you're first generation, you might have to take on 1 or 2, 3 extra jobs to, improve your quality of life while you're at an undergraduate institution. Sometimes that may also lead to social challenges. So I know that as an undergraduate, a lot of my friends would go to Key West for spring break or these amazing places for spring break. And that wasn't something that I could participate in because I knew that I would have to ask my family for money. And then doing that would put a constraint on them. So that would cause some social isolation in that respect. And especially for our first generation students that are from an underrepresented group or even from a low family background, they might be targets of prejudice in reference to, their minority status or their socioeconomic status, and then having to overcome these racial disparities or discrimination can lead to feelings of isolation, alienation, marginalization, and also just loneliness. And all of these have a negative impact on the way that first generation students experience their undergraduate education. So I identify as first generation, a minority in respect to being Pacific Islander and also being a woman in STEM. And also I come from a family of low income. And what that meant to me is that there was this huge pressure on me to succeed. So like I said before, my 5 older siblings had to sacrifice their opportunity to go to college so that I could go to college. And I felt the weight of that almost every day, especially since I wasn't going to school in the same city that I grew up. So I went to school, outside of the state that I grew up in. And so every day that I thought it was hard on me, I would just think back to oh, my siblings don't have this opportunity. So I need to cherish every second that I get to, further my career and whatnot. And in addition to just, this pressure to succeed, I think that I felt that I needed to excel in everything that I did when I was an undergraduate. So I'll show you how that I internalized that, but it wasn't enough for me to just get into college. I needed to do anything and everything to make myself stand out. And I think that's something that students from underrepresented groups feel heavily because we don't see a lot of people who look like this in our immediate circle. So in order to, make ourselves stand out and make sure that we're doing everything we can to get the opportunities that we need, there's this feeling that we have to do something more, something extraordinary. And the last thing is that I felt like I had to stay in line. So I knew I actually got a 4-year, a full ride scholarship for volleyball. And they market it as a full ride scholarship, but it's contingent on your performance academically and athletically year to year. So when I received that scholarship, I felt like I needed to do everything by the book, do anything anyone in administration had said, just because I didn't want to lose my opportunity to get an education. And I think that is one of the biggest barriers that I faced, because it wasn't, there wasn't that extra pressure on me. Like I didn't have to, you know, suppress some of my personality to achieve what I had achieved. All right. So how did I internalize that? This is how I internalized that. I spread myself super thin when I was an undergraduate. So like I said before, I felt this pressure to succeed. So I decided to do anything and everything that would make me stand out in comparison to my peers. And I don't know if this has to do with first gen or with me being from an underrepresented group, but I think there's a lot of interplay between those two identities. And so in undergrad, I was a student athlete, Chem Club president, and all the things listed on here. And I'm actually surprised at how much I could do back then, because now I can't even go to the grocery store and do something else in the same day. Like, look at what I was able to do just a few years back, but now everything just takes effort. But these are some of the pressures that I felt, and I had to accomplish this thing in environments that, you know, weren't exactly encouraging. So I went to a really small, primarily white undergraduate institution in Colorado, and the distribution of students there was right around 1,200. And so when you look at this Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander stat, it's less than 0.5% of the student population. And when you do the math, it turns out to 3 students. So it's me and 2 other people from my background. I mean, they weren't even in the same field as me. So it's not like I saw them around campus very often. And this is the type of environment that I had to thrive in. And that alone was just very challenging. And that environment didn't really change when I went to my graduate program. So this is for the entire graduate program of LAS, and that's about 4,500 students. But you can see, although the number increased, the percentage is less. So I think if you do the math, the percentage was like 5 students, and that's in the entire LAS, so not just the chemistry department. But similarly, I mean, these are things that I'm passionate about, you know, like policy of women in higher education or the diversity committee. So I didn't mind putting in the extra effort to make some of these programs happen. But I will say that putting all this pressure on myself and putting in the hours for this did distract me from being in the lab. And already as a grad student, which you guys know, you work like 40 to 50, maybe even 60-hour work weeks. And so doing all of this stuff on top of my career, you know, on top of trying to complete my dissertation, it's just a lot. And I did this because I felt like, again, I'm one of one. I need to prove myself. This is the only way that I'm going to excel. But I don't think that was the case. I think that I overdid it. But I'm happy because all of these experiences led to me getting the position and the role that I'm in today. But I don't think that it was clear to me that I didn't need to do everything under the sun to be a standout student. All right. So, other direction. These are some of the things that I wish I'd known as a first generation college student. And the first thing is that it's super okay to ask for help. I think first generation college students kind of take on the perception that they need to do everything alone and that they need to be self-sufficient. But the comment that I put here is that you can be self-sufficient, but also have a support system. And I think that in all the cases that I had listed, you know, in leadership positions, you tend to want to do everything so that they're done right. But if I just ask for help in, you know, in small little ways, I think that could have alleviated a lot of the stress that I had felt. And what's crazy is that there are literally so many people on campus whose job it is to help you. So if they're not helping you, they're not doing their job. But I know that the point of that, which I allude to a little bit later, is that you need to know what your resources are. And I think that's a big part too, is that I was so stuck in that I needed to do everything by myself that I didn't reach out to other resources on campus. And the second thing that I know is that there's so many resources and there's so many people who just want help too. And when you have people advocating for you in your corner, it just like opens up a ton of different opportunities. I know that so these types of roles, these diversity, equity, and inclusion roles are very few and in between. And I wouldn't have known about this position if my PI didn't, you know, forward it to me. So having people who know what type of interest you have and opportunities that are out there can be super helpful. Okay. The next thing is that you should get out of your comfort zone. I think that I do this very well now, but I don't think I did this well before. And when you get out of your comfort zone, I know that is a hard thing because there's this like diagram that academics use that the first place out of your comfort zone is this fear zone. And because it's something new, something that you're not used to, you feel a huge lack of self-confidence. But once you get out of this initial fear of trying something new, you start to gain, certain attributes and new skills that allow for growth. And I think I mean this both academically and kind of recreationally. So academically, super important to get out of your comfort zone because collaborative research is what leads to innovation. And I know initially when I started my PhD program in my third year after I joined the group and started like really deep in my research project, my boss wanted me to collaborate with the physics department, and physics is kind of scary. So I'm glad that, you're doing your thing out there. But I was so nervous to learn a new thing and not be good at that new thing that I was a little anxious about starting that collaboration, but that collaboration ended up in like 3 different papers, resulting in me writing 3 different papers with that group. So academically, I think it's super important to get out of your comfort zone and, expand your expertise because it's all about that transferable skills, whether you're looking for a postdoc or, a faculty position. If you can come with these diverse perspectives, you're going to have innovative research that will make you an attractive candidate for these types of roles. And then just recreationally too, I think there's this stigma with individuals from underrepresented groups that they don't like to try new things, especially when it comes to the outdoors. That's a personal thing. And I absolutely love like backpacking, hiking, mountain biking. And I think that even in those experiences, pushing me to do things that I'm not quite used to, it like overlaps with some of the things that you do in a lab. You're like trying to be an independent scientist, and it's all about the different kind of approaches that you take to certain problems. And I think like with mountain biking, you have to think so fast when you're going over different, elements of the trail and whatnot. And I know that sounds kind of silly to compare that to doing stuff in the lab, but these little things that you train yourself to do make an impact down the line. So get out of your comfort zone is my second thing that I wish that I knew. My third thing is something that I'm sure you guys have heard throughout your graduate career or undergraduate as well, is that imposter syndrome is very, very real. And imposter syndrome, if you're not familiar with it, it's like this feeling of feeling like a fraud or doubting your abilities. And I think one of the most annoying things is like when you tell somebody that you're doubting your abilities and they go, I don't get why you feel like that. And it's just like so annoying that they don't understand. Like I don't understand either, but it doesn't make it less of a thing. And I think that the thing that I wish that I heard when I was, throughout my undergraduate and my graduate career is that your feelings are valid and that you belong here. Not that, it's ridiculous that I feel a type of way, because when you comparison is the thief of joy. And when you start comparing yourself to your peers, it can really weigh down on you. So I wish that, or I'm here to tell you that, if you are feeling this, your feelings are completely valid and you absolutely belong here. You competed with, I know for chemistry, we have a pool of almost 300 applicants, and we let 40 students in. Like that's not luck. That's not just given to you. That's something that you earn. And that's something that the admissions committee, full of, PIs who are in your direct peers, they decided that you belonged here. So that's something that I wish that I heard throughout my undergraduate and graduate career. And then number 4 would be values matters just as much as experience. And what I mean by this is that for first generation college students, they can't go to their parents to ask them about, how do I do this? How do I do that? Because I can't tell you how many times I try to explain what I was doing in my research to my family, and every single time they just don't get what I'm doing. They don't understand how hard it is. And they don't get the nuances of being in a graduate program or achieving like a college degree. But what I will say is the times where I thought that, I wasn't good enough, this was hard. I just thought back to how hard my mom worked and how she was able to raise 7 kids on one salary. And those values that, hard work, good work ethic, meant just as much to me as, learning from a mentor on what experiences they had and how that could influence or make my life in undergraduate education easier. So values matter just as much as experience do. And for first generation college students, like don't be afraid to get your family involved, although they don't understand every little detail that you try to describe to them. they're just there to support you. And like I said before, me getting my doctorate degree is a huge point of pride for my family, and I'm happy that I was able to do that with them. So just making them feel proud and understanding that you are doing something pretty extraordinary would have been really helpful to me as a mentor. And the last thing, of course, is to familiarize yourself with the resources available to you. I think that was a huge point in grad school for me as well. I got so caught up in the chemistry department that I didn't realize there was resources outside of the chemistry department, especially in the grad school. So I just did a quick Google search for you guys on resources that UIUC has for first generation college students. And one of the first ones that I saw was that this is one of the few campuses that have a first generation directory on their website. So what this directory is, it's out of the Office of Student Success and Inclusion and Belonging. They have pretty much anyone who's a first generation student and wants to submit a profile, they're all listed on this website. I know that one woman is highlighted there, but there's tons of other mentors on this resource, and you can filter them out by level. So there's faculty who are first generation students, there's undergraduates, I think they even do it by senior graduate students and first year graduate students. And essentially you can submit a request to find a mentor, and they can pair you up with other individuals who are either in positions that you feel like you want to pursue, or other individuals who are in similar stages of the career as you, which I think is a cool resource if you guys want to look into that. Another thing is get to know your deans in the graduate college. So when I first got here, I'm meeting a ton of different people who kind of align with my role. And two of the people that I got to meet are right on this slide. They both work in the graduate college. Alexis Thompson is the Associate Dean for Student Success. And as I was mentioning before, there are literally people whose roles are to, help you succeed. And it's in the name. Her role is for student success. And one of the things that her offices sort of provide are, if you need an ombudsperson, or if you have like this challenge that you're facing within your department, with your PI, within your group, and you need somebody to help, either a third person to listen to your issues, they can do that. If you need somebody to help you understand ways to problem solve, or ways to have appropriate discussions with people you have challenges with, they run workshops to help you through like problem solving skills. And they also host different time management workshops and things like that. So if these are things that you struggle with, their office provides programming to help reduce those barriers. The other person that I met and who I think is an important person to get connected with is Lisa Abston. She is the Assistant Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Again, her role is all about making the graduate departments more inclusive and making sure that they're doing everything that they can to make each student feel like they belong. One thing that I will say, that if you get connected with these individuals, they give travel awards, or I don't even know if they're awards, like you have to apply for them, but they're always looking for students to travel with them to conferences to help recruit. But in addition to helping recruit, you get access to a network of individuals that you might not have the opportunity before, because they pay for, everything, your lodging, your registration, and things like that. I've been to 6 different conferences this year. Graduate school was only at 2 out of the 6 that I was at, but for those, they had brought students and supported them. You do have to work the booth, but you also get time to kind of enjoy the conference. So that's also a way to get connected with some of the resources that you guys have here on campus. And I'll say that Alexis Thompson, she actually has a PhD in chemistry from Illinois, and then she decided to go into this sort of administrative route. So just when you're considering what you want to do after you graduate, there's a lot of different options for you. And I think it's great that someone in such a high position has similar experience of pursuing a PhD in STEM fields, because it's very different for students in STEM than it is for other, liberal arts departments. And it's great to have somebody who understands sort of the struggles that we go through as students in STEM. All right. And I also looked up resources at the counseling center. So one thing that I think is very unique about our counseling center is that they have experts from different underrepresented groups. So this I also find is helpful, that, it's hard to go to somebody who you think doesn't have a personal connection with your identity. And so if that is also an issue for you, they have experts for each one of the that identify with each one of the common underrepresented groups that you can go and talk to. In addition to that, they have resources for first generation students. I think one big thing that, a lot of resources online and a lot of people across the university, they put effort into this guide to university life. So just knowing the jargon of, undergraduate education, they put together this entire guide to help walk you through that. So if there's any undergrads on the Zoom listening in and need, or are curious about what resources are open to you, this is one of those resources. And then another way to sort of reduce the barriers and connect with people from similar communities is, again, to get connected at conferences. So 4 out of the 6 conferences are on this slide. I went to NOVASHIN, which is the National Organization for the Professional Advancement of Black Chemists and Chemical Engineers. And again, this is not really first gen, because everyone who attends is not first gen, but I'm sure that you'll find communities within these resources that are also first gen. I also went to SOPHIS, so that's the Society for Advancing Chicano, Hispanics, and Native Americans in Science. This was actually in Puerto Rico this year, so that was super cool. And this conference is huge. I think there was like 3,000 to 4,000 students there. So again, the networking is priceless at these types of in these types of environments. I went to ASST as well, which is it's American Indian Society for Engineering Scientists. ABRCANS, which is the annual biomedical research conference for minoritized scientists. This one is super cool. There's about 6,000 attendees, and this year the Nobel Prize winner in chemistry gave the opening remarks. So it was awesome to hear from, and she's a woman, which is even better to see somebody from an underrepresented group, earning such a high accolade within our field, and then giving back by talking to, the next generation of scientists. So this is a really good way. And I'll say that I'm always looking for students to travel with me to these conferences. I take about 2 to 3 students from chemistry and chemical and biomolecular engineering. And right now there isn't really a method for me to choose students. It's just the students that I know and students that are willing to go with me. But if anybody listening in is interested and you're either in chemistry or chemical and biomolecular engineering, I'd love for you guys to come with me and, get involved with some of the networks that are available at these conferences. All right. And sort of the last section that I'm going to talk about are ways that I think institutions can sort of support first generation college students. The first one is to reduce stigma. So stigma are sort of these negative perceptions associated with different people's ideals or groups. And in order to reduce stigma, I think one thing we can do is promote and host quarterly academic, professional, and community events that center around the strengths and diverse experiences of first generation students. So very much something like this. I also think that it's important to create visibility. So similar to how we do, we can post online profiles and digital stories of graduate students, faculty, staff, campus leaders, and alumni who identify as first generation. Again, I think there's a lot of power in seeing somebody who went through similar experiences as you in a position that you see yourself in. And if there was a way to, reach out to those individuals by knowing who those individuals are, I think that can do a tremendous thing for first generation students who are looking for those mentors and looking for people who have the information on how to get to places that they want to be. In addition to that, I think it's important to foster a sense of belonging by creating spaces of connection, community, by convening graduate students who identify as first generation at these receptions and workshops. Similar again to this, and one thing that I'll say about it, which kind of goes on to the next slide too, is I don't think that the students should do all the work. I think these types of programs need to be embedded within the infrastructure of each of the departments. And I'll say chemistry, there's a lot of progress that we need to make, but they've made a lot of headway in that respect by adding in, that professional development course where they get to talk about inclusive excellence or just how to be a TA, some things that, I think graduate students and first year graduate students, but specifically first generation graduate students, aren't really used to. I give exit interviews for, the department, and I get to interact with students leading the program. And I ask these students, one of the questions that we ask them is like, what is one way, if you were department chair, that you would improve, the program? And some of the answers that I've received in the past, few interviews is that, especially with being a TA, it was super hard on them and the student was also international. So with the language barrier, it was super hard for that student to just jump in and start teaching a class, and they didn't feel like we gave them enough resources on how to be a proper TA. And he wished that there was a little bit more of that. So that was one thing that we try to address in that professional development course. But to that student's opinion, it wasn't long enough. So these are the types of things that I think that are important and foster a sense of belonging when you start listening to your peers and trying to implement, initiatives that address some of the issues they feel like they're facing. And that goes on to developing sustainable and supportive programming. And again, I don't think it should be all on the students. I think chemistry is doing a really good job at putting somebody in this position that can sort of collect data and experiences on what's happening so they can start implementing the right programming and initiatives that help support first-gen students from underrepresented groups, and ways to just improve the climate and culture in the department in general. And that's my last slide. So that's all I had for you guys today, and I'll take any questions that you guys might have. Thank you. Yeah. Do you guys have any questions?
I have a question. You kind of touched on this a little bit, but what are some things that you could do as like a TA to help first gen students who might be in your class?
That's a great question. This is kind of a side story, but I think it kind of goes back to visibility, and it doesn't have to do with first gen, but it just has to do with perception in general. So I was speaking to a student who, it was right during the heart of COVID. So they went to, virtual everything. And after their virtual classes, they had to fill out an evaluation form. And on that evaluation form, there's certain questions that you have to answer, but there's a section where you can fill in the blank and give certain comments. And the student actually said that the virtual classes was one of the best experiences that they had because they felt more seen by their TAs. So one thing that you can kind of be cognizant of is your own biases. If you're, avoiding contact with students that isolate themselves because they're first gen, or just making sure that you see everybody in the room. And I thought that story was super heartbreaking because it sucks that a virtual class is the most connection that you've ever felt in the in-person class, but it's because of people's biases that she was a student from an underrepresented group. So that made it, she had a feeling that had to do with why she wasn't being approached by TAs, asking if they need help or trying to reach out, because that was a barrier for them, or they had their own biases. And whether or not that is true or untrue, it's how she perceived the situation. That's the important part. So if you, not going around asking, are you first gen, do you need help? But just making sure that you're providing equal amount of help to everybody in the room, I think would be one approach to that. Yeah.
There might be some questions.
I don't know where the mouse is. I tried to, that's why, okay, it's yours. Okay. Okay, cool. Nice.
The other resources could be assigned to you. I can also listen, okay? Other resources could be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of a lot of burden. I feel like the thing to go back and support my family, and at the same time, it's quite a hard thing.
Yeah, I agree. And that was a really question. It was more of a comment, but I'll say that if you're asking how did I overcome that? I don't think I ever did. That's still my main goal, is to be at a place in my life where I can give back to my family and support them, financially, just like they've supported me. But I think that accomplishing the things that I have, like an undergraduate degree and a PhD program, that's enough for them. Me thinking that I have to do any more than that is not what they want for me, right? Just doing those things that I intended to do. I think that those are things that they're really proud of, and that's enough. It's like when you want to you're trying to look for something for your parents for Christmas, but they already have everything. It's kind of like that, they're not asking anything from me. It's just something that I personally want to do. I think that the thing that they want from me is for me to just be happy, and
PhD didn't really make me happy, actually. It's actually quite stressful. But I think once I had that PhD, that alone was an amazing feeling. And the opportunities that come with getting a PhD, I do see the efficacy in that for pursuing a graduate degree. So yeah, it's tough. It's very tough. Yeah. Okay.
I also have maybe one more question.
Yeah.
Anybody else has a question?
Sure.
I guess this is something you also touched on a little bit, but I was wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit more about maybe some similarities or difference about being first gen as an undergrad versus first gen as a grad student versus if that's like just the first person to get a graduate degree or like first person to get a university degree.
To answer that last part, I wasn't the first person in my extended family to get a university degree. That's just in my immediate family, so me and my 7 siblings or 6 siblings. And then I was the first person in my whole extended family to get a doctorate degree. And I will say that because you experience undergrad as a first gen, experience graduate school as a first gen was a lot more palatable because you went through 4 years of the toxic academia kind of environment. So I don't like to tell people this, but what I say often is that my tolerance for what my threshold for what I tolerated was pretty high in grad school. So most of my approach to grad school was just to stay in line, and I'm not recommending people do that. I didn't really feel like I was the person who needed to voice my opinion. I just needed to do what I need to do in the lab and get my degree. So I don't think I distinguished anything differently as a first gen in graduate school, but I think that the barriers were much higher experience undergraduate education for the first time. Is that kind of what you meant?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But I will say that the amount of not praise or compliments, but sort of around that line that you received as a first gen in graduate school was much higher than what I experienced in undergraduate school. And although it feels weird to be like targeted because of that, it also felt really nice that people were like, wow, you're a first gen and you've made it. And again, with that whole sense of imposter syndrome and the people validating you in that way, I do think that I felt that much more at the graduate level than I did as an undergrad, which is kind of sad because there should be more first gen students pursuing doctoral programs. But for our generation, that's kind of paving the way for the next generation. I think, that's something that I had thought about. You should help yourself to pizza if you're okay.
I remember I have this huge difficulty to reach out to people. Or like networking is super hard to be. So what would be your suggestion for first generation students to step out and get out of their comfort zone and stuff without work?
I think you should just do it. I know that's terrible advice, but I think a lot of the barriers that we think are there are in our mind because again, there's so many people out there that just want to help. So a big thing that I do at the conferences is I'm trying to recruit undergraduates to come to our program. And one thing that I tell them is that they should reach out to the PIs that they're interested in working in. And so many of them just haven't right now, but these PIs are the people who are looking over your applications and are the people who are, recommending you to be in the program. So you want to make those connections early on. You want to make sure that they know your name, they know why you're interested, they know what you bring to the table so that when it comes down to the time where they're like, okay, are we going to accept this person or offer this person admission? They've already acclimated to seeing, seeing why you would be perfect for our program. And the same thing goes for your next career too. So many of these people, don't waste their time if you're just going to be like, oh, I was wondering X, Y, and Z without doing your due diligence in what their research is or anything like that. I think that you need to approach people who are in careers that you see for yourself in a very strategic way. Because, they have time constraints that they have all these responsibilities as well. But I do know that from everybody that I've kind of spoke to, they are willing to mentor as long as you, you bring a good proposal to the table. So I know that it's hard to reach out, but I think that you should just do it. And the worst thing that they can say is no. And then you just find a different, there's so many people out there. I think thinking that one person is going to be your foot in the door is not the approach because you never know who is going to be the person to give you an opportunity. Yeah, that's what I would keep in mind. And I know it's difficult, but I would say just do it. Just do it. And they don't personally know you too. So it's not like, it's like not a hard thing. But if they are in your department, if that's somebody that you're trying to reach out to, I think that they should be that's a whole part. That's one of the pillars of being a research PI. It's research, teaching, and outreach. And that outreach and that mentorship associated with that outreach should be a big part of why they became a PI in the first place. So they should be willing to, help you out. But I understand that that's a challenge. All right. Well, if there's not any other questions, thank you so much for having me.